My mother-in-law kept barging into our home and said, "Until you're officially married, this is our family's house. Know your place." Then the realtor brought the deed. I'm the sole owner. She stopped saying, "girl." I stood at the kitchen counter and watched Barbara open my refrigerator again. No questions, no permission. She just walks into the apartment with her key and does whatever she wants. She took out the glass dish with the turkey I had prepared the night before. I had an important lunch with a client today, and I had spent 2 hours making sure everything was perfect. Barbara sniffed the dish, wrinkled her nose, and carried the dish to the trash can. "What are you doing?" I blurted out. She didn't even turn around. She just opened the lid of the trash can and threw my turkey and side dish in there. Barbara! I barely managed to hold back a scream. She finally looked at me, slowly, condescendingly, as if I were a fly bothering her. "Until you're officially married." She began loudly so the neighbors behind the wall could hear. "This is considered our family's home, not yours. Don't forget your place, girl." My face was burning. My hands were shaking with helplessness and rage. I wanted to say something back, but my tongue seemed to be stuck to the roof of my mouth. Brian appeared in the doorway, my Brian, who was supposed to protect me, but he just looked confusedly from my mother to me and said nothing. And then the doorbell rang. I went to the door, still trembling. A man in his 50s was standing on the doorstep with a leather briefcase in his hands. "Miss Bellows, I'm Castor, the realtor. We had an appointment to sign the paperwork for the apartment." Barbara behind me became alert. "But to understand how I ended up here, you have to go back. Back to a time when I didn't know what it meant to fight for my life. My name is Cindy Cartwright. I'm 29 years old, and I'm a lawyer. Not the kind of lawyer who defends rich people in expensive suits. I specialize in bankruptcies and debt collection. The dirty work where you have to look people in the eye when you take away their last possessions. I grew up in a trailer park near Memphis. My mother, Jolene, worked as a hotel maid during the day and a waitress in a diner at night. My father disappeared when I was 5. He just left one evening and never came back. When I was 12, the landlord came to evict us. We owed 2 months' rent. My mother knelt down and begged him to give us another week. He just turned away and left. I made a promise to myself then. I would never beg anyone again. I studied like crazy. I got a scholarship and made it into law school. I wanted to understand the system that had destroyed our family. I wanted to learn how to play the game. My mother died when I was 24, lung cancer. She smoked cheap cigarettes like crazy to relieve her stress, a pack a day, no less. Before she died, she took my hand and whispered, "Don't be cruel, Cindy. Don't lose yourself." I promised. But I'm not sure I kept my word. A year ago, I celebrated a 1 case at a bar. It was Friday, and I wanted to have a glass of wine and forget. At the next table sat a man, tall with a simple face, wearing jeans and a plaid shirt. He didn't look like all the lawyers and financiers I dealt with every day. We started talking by accident. He asked me to pass the salt. Then he treated me to a beer. Then we talked for 3 hours straight. His name was Brian Bellows, 31 years old, a dispatcher at a logistics company. He talked about himself simply, without embellishment. His father, Robert, was an alcoholic, drank everything away, died at 52 of cirrhosis. His mother, Barbara, raised the family on her own, working as an accountant for a small construction equipment rental company. "My mom is a strong woman," Brian said with such warmth that I felt a little envious. Without her, I wouldn't have been able to do anything. He also mentioned his uncle Michael, Robert's younger brother. Michael never married, worked as an engineer at a factory, and lived modestly in a small apartment on the outskirts of town. A lonely, quiet man. I liked Brian. He seemed honest, the kind of person who wouldn't betray you. A little over a year ago, I also handled Barbara Bellows' case. She came to our firm asking for help in suing Robert's second wife for the apartment. Robert had remarried after his divorce from Barbara and bought the apartment with his new wife. But Barbara believed that the money for the purchase was earned during their time together. I took on the case. I diligently gathered evidence, but I lost. The judge recognized the rights of the second wife. When I met Brian at the bar, I didn't immediately realize who he was. The surname Bellows is not that rare, and several months had passed. But when he mentioned his mother Barbara and his late father Robert, I felt a chill inside. I could have left. I should have. But he sat there in front of me, smiling sincerely, and I couldn't get up and walk away. I didn't tell him I knew his mother. I didn't mention the case. I convinced myself that it was just a coincidence, that I had a right to a personal life, that not all relationships have to start with complete disclosure. We started dating. Brian was simple, reliable. He didn't play games or manipulate people. After all those years of manipulating people in the courtroom myself, it was like a breath of fresh air. 6 months later, Uncle Michael unexpectedly bought the apartment that Barbara had lost in court at full market value. The family decided that he was buying it for Brian and Barbara to give them a normal place to live. Michael offered Brian a place to stay, and Brian asked me to live with him. I agreed, although somewhere deep down I felt that it was somehow wrong, probably. From day one, Barbara made it clear that I was a stranger here. She didn't yell or make a scene. She just ignored me, talked only to her son, rearranged my things, checked the food in the refrigerator. She came 3 times a week with food for Brian. She never asked if she could come in. She just used her key. Brian excused her. It's hard for Mom. After my father died, she had almost no one left. A week ago, Uncle Michael died. A heart attack, sudden and brutal. At the funeral, Barbara cried, and Brian held her hand. I stood aside, feeling like an outsider, and today the notary arrived. Michael's will was short. The apartment goes to Cindy Bellows, and now Barbara was rummaging through the closet, looking for something. And finally, she found a folder with my work documents. She found Barbara Bellows' case. Brian! Her voice was sharp as glass. Look at this! He came over, took the folder, read it. You were my mother's lawyer? He looked at me as if he were seeing me for the first time. Yes, I nodded. A year ago. And you lost the case, Barbara added. I wonder if it was by accident. What do you mean? I felt my heart beating faster. Barbara smiled coldly. You lost the case. Michael bought the apartment, and then he suddenly died and left everything to you. You set it all up, didn't you? You had an affair with my uncle and manipulated him into transferring the property to you. That's crazy. I took a step back. It's true. Barbara raised her voice. You set it all up. First you lost the court case, then you manipulated Michael. And now you're using my son. You just wanted this apartment. I opened my mouth to protest, but Brian looked at me with such doubt that the words stuck in my throat. Were you really my mom's lawyer in that case? He repeated quietly. Why didn't you ever tell me? I looked at him and realized that my silence looked like guilt. I stood in the middle of the living room and looked at Brian. He sat on the couch, his hands clasped between his knees, unable to look me in the eye. Barbara stood by the window, holding the folder with my documents like a weapon. I represented your mother a year ago, I began, trying to speak calmly. That's true, but I lost fair and square, Brian. I did everything I could. Then why didn't you tell me? He finally looked up. His eyes were filled with hurt. When we met, when I told you about my mom, about my dad, why didn't you say anything? I hesitated. How could I explain that I was afraid? That I understood our relationship had started on the wrong foot, and if he found out, everything would be ruined? Because I knew it would be like this, I blurted out. I knew you would have doubts, and I was afraid of that. And you were right, Barbara said coldly, because there is something to doubt and fear, girl. She came closer and put the folder on the table. You lost my case. Then Michael bought the apartment. A few months later, he died and left everything to you." Barbara paused, looking me straight in the eye. "An old, lonely man, a young, beautiful lawyer. Do you think it's hard to guess what happened?" "Nothing happened." I barely managed to hold back a scream. "I hardly ever talked to Michael. We saw each other a few times, that's all." "Then why did he leave you the apartment?" Brian stood up. "That's ridiculous. You hardly knew each other." I didn't know what to say because I didn't understand myself. Barbara turned to another sheet of paper. "Here's the explanation." She handed the document to Brian. "Michael's bank statements. Look, there are several transfers to Cindy Cartwright, $200 each, every month for 3 months before his death." Brian read it and his face darkened. "That's payment for legal advice." I grabbed the statement. "Michael asked me to help him with his will. I charged a nominal fee. It was all official." "Official?" Barbara smiled coldly. "You took advantage of a lonely old man, messed with his head so he would sign the apartment over to you, and now you're playing the innocent lamb." "That's not true." "Then explain." Brian looked at me intently. "Why you didn't tell me you were helping Uncle Michael? Why did you hide it?" "Because I didn't think it was necessary. It was work, Brian." "Just a job." He was silent for a long time. Then he took his jacket. "I need time to think. I'm going to my mom's." "Brian." He didn't turn around. He just left. Barbara gave me one last triumphant look and followed him. The door closed. I was left alone. I sat down on the floor next to the sofa and wrapped my arms around my knees. Tears streamed down my face, but I didn't even wipe them away. Inside, I was burning with helplessness. I hadn't done anything, nothing wrong. I was just doing my job. And now it looked like I was a monster. The next few days dragged on like a nightmare. I went to work, sat over my ices, but saw nothing. Brian didn't call or write. I didn't dare dial his number either. What could I say? How could I prove I wasn't guilty when all the facts were against me? My colleagues looked at me askance. Someone had already told them about the situation. The legal community is small and gossip spreads quickly. A partner at the firm called me into his office and asked me directly, "Cindy, is it true? Did you receive an inheritance from a client?" "Not from a client, from a relative of my boyfriend." "But you provided him with legal services?" "Yes." "Advice on his will?" The partner shook his head. "This looks bad, very bad. The ethics committee may take an interest." I nodded silently. I knew he was right. That evening, I sat on the floor next to the table where Michael's will papers lay. I reread them over and over again. And there, on the last page, was a short line I hadn't noticed before. "I leave the apartment to Cindy Cartwright because I see in her an honesty that will be a good addition to our family, and I wish her and Brian all the best." I cried. For the first time in a year. Out of helplessness and pain. Michael believed in me. He saw something good in me, and I couldn't prove anything. I couldn't protect his memory or myself. A week later, Brian returned, without his things, without a smile. He stood in the doorway and looked like a stranger, as if an insurmountable chasm had formed between us. "Can I come in?" I nodded. He walked into the living room and sat down on the edge of the sofa. He looked tense, as if he were preparing for battle. "Mom found a witness," he said, without looking at me. "Uncle Michael's neighbor, Mrs. Gretchen. She saw you come to his place several times in the evening, once you even left in the morning. I felt like I'd been hit. It was for consultations. He was old. It was hard for him to come to the office. I went to his house so he could sign the papers in a comfortable setting, and once I came early in the morning and left in the morning." "Why didn't you tell me about these meetings?" "Because I didn't think it was necessary." I raised my voice. "God, Brian, it was work. Ordinary, boring, legal work. I don't report to you about every client. But he wasn't just a client. He was my uncle. I didn't know he was leaving me the apartment. Do you think I would have taken the case if I had known how it would end?" He was silent for a long time. Then quietly, "But it looks different, you know? You hid the fact that you knew my mother. You hid the fact that you were in contact with my uncle, and now he's dead, and everything belongs to you. Do you really think I'm capable of that?" He looked at me, and in his eyes I saw doubt. Not certainty, but doubt. I don't know what to think. It was worse than any accusation. The next day, Barbara came. With her was a man in a strict suit, a lawyer, as he introduced himself. His name was Harrison, and he specialized in inheritance law. "We are filing a lawsuit," she announced solemnly. "We are demanding that the will be declared invalid. You unethically exploited your professional position and manipulated an elderly man." The lawyer looked at me coldly, assessingly. "There is reason to believe that you used your personal relationship to influence the testator, perhaps even of an intimate nature." "What?" I exclaimed. "This is crazy. I had no relationship with Michael other than a professional one." "Then why did he leave you the apartment?" The lawyer raised an eyebrow. "Why not his nephew, his close relatives, but you, a virtual stranger?" I didn't know how to respond. Barbara smiled, and that smile conveyed a sense of triumph. "We have witnesses," the lawyer added. "A neighbor who saw you visiting, a waiter from the restaurant where you had lunch with Mr. Bellows. All of this paints a picture of unacceptable behavior. It can all be explained." "In court," he interrupted me. "We'll see you in court." When they left, I realized that my reputation was at stake. Even if the court recognized the will as valid, the gossips would do their thing. In the legal world, trust is everything. And Asya was losing it before my very eyes. I hired a private investigator. Rex was recommended by a colleague who said he was the best in town. Discreet and professional. A tall man with gray hair at his temples, he listened to me attentively without interrupting, sometimes nodding. "I want to know the truth," I said. "I want to understand why Michael left me the apartment, and whether Barbara is setting me up." Rex nodded. "Give me a week, maybe less." He called 5 days later. "We need to meet urgently." We met at a coffee shop on the outskirts of town. Rex put a thick folder on the table, his face serious. Barbara Bellows met with Michael a week before his death. A long conversation in a coffee shop on Maple Street. I spoke to the waiter who served them. He remembers it well because Barbara was crying. Crying? Yes, she asked Michael for something. He refused at first, then agreed. The waiter says they even hugged at the end. My heart was pounding so hard that I could hear it in my ears. What exactly did she ask for? The waiter didn't hear all the details, but there's more. Rex opened the folder. There are surveillance cameras in that cafe. I managed to get the recording from that day, with sound. He put a flash drive in front of me. At home, I inserted the flash drive into my laptop. My hands were shaking. The quality of the recording was average, but the sound was clear. Barbara was sitting across from Michael, holding his hand. Her face was sad, almost pleading. "Michael, I'm begging you, leave Cindy's apartment." "Why her? She's a stranger to our family. Brian loves her. They're going to get married, I'm sure. It will be your gift to your new family. This gesture will strengthen their relationship and show Cindy that we accept her as one of our own." "Do you really think so?" "Of course. It will be the beginning of something good. For all of us. For Brian, for Cindy, for the whole family." Michael nodded and wiped his eyes with his hand. "Okay, if you say so. You know what's best." The recording ended. I sat staring at the blank screen, unable to believe it. Barbara herself had convinced Michael to leave me the apartment. Herself. With her own words. But why? Rex called that evening. I found out more. I talked to a few people who knew Barbara and Michael. She wanted you to get the apartment. Not Brian, not herself. You. But why? I didn't understand. I suspect that she could have taken the apartment away from you through the courts, accusing you of unethical behavior, and Brian would have seen your true colors and left you for good. She was counting on that from the beginning. I froze. She wanted to break us up. It was the perfect plan. You get the apartment, she goes to court, Brian sees the scandal and loses his trust in you forever. I couldn't breathe. Everything inside me turned upside down. But Michael, he trusted her. She took advantage of his trust. Yes, Rex nodded. She took advantage of everyone, him, you, even her own son. I sat on the couch with the flash drive in my hands. Barbara wasn't just fighting for the apartment. She was fighting for her son, for control over him. And I was just a pawn in this game. Just like poor Michael, who thought he was doing something good for his family. She didn't expect Michael to die so quickly, but apparently it turned out to be very beneficial for her from her point of view. The only question was, what should I do with this information now? I sat on the couch with the flash drive in my hands and waited. Brian was supposed to come for the last of his things at 7 in the evening. I didn't know if I should show him the evidence. Would he believe me? Did it matter? He arrived at 7 sharp. He knocked on the door, even though he could have just walked in. He still had the keys. I opened the door. Brian stood in the doorway in his work clothes, looking tired. He had dark circles under his eyes, but his posture was straight and his gaze was steady. "Hi," he said briefly. "Hi." He walked past me to the bedroom without saying a word or touching me. I heard him open the closet and take out his things. "Brian," I called, standing at the bedroom door. "I need to talk to you." He didn't turn around, continuing to fold shirts into a box. "If this is about the apartment, I don't want anything. It's yours. I just need my things." "This isn't about the apartment. It's about your mother." Now he stopped. He turned around, looking at me coldly. "What exactly do you want to say about my mother?" "She set it all up, Brian. The apartment, the will, the accusations. She manipulated Uncle Michael into leaving me his inheritance and then—" "Stop," he raised his hand. His voice was calm, even too calm. "Are you seriously accusing my mother of arranging my uncle's death?" "No, I'm not talking about his death. I'm talking about the will. She convinced him to transfer the apartment to me." "Why?" Brian crossed his arms over his chest. "Explain the logic to me. Why would my mother give you the apartment? So she could take it away through the courts. To accuse me of manipulation so you would see me as bad, to separate us." Brian was silent for a few seconds. Then he smiled, bitterly, without joy. "Do you understand how that sounds? My mother, who barely makes ends meet at her job, who raised me alone after my father's death, suddenly becomes a genius of intrigue. She's always a few steps ahead, manipulating everyone around her. That sounds like paranoia, Cindy." "I have proof." "What proof?" He didn't raise his voice, but there was steel in his tone. "Documents? Records? Something you, as a lawyer, could have fabricated?" "I didn't fabricate anything. You hid from me that you were my mother's lawyer," Brian said firmly. "I hid that I communicated with Uncle Michael, provided him with legal services, and now that everything has come out, you accuse my mother of conspiracy. That's very convenient." "I didn't hide it. I just what?" He stepped closer. "Just didn't think it was necessary to tell me? When we started dating, when I told you about my family, about my mom, about what we'd been through, you didn't say anything. You knew who I was, and I didn't know who you were." His words hit me like a slap in the face. He was right. Partially right. "I was afraid of your reaction," I whispered. "And you were right to be afraid, because my reaction is distrust. How can I trust you now? How can I believe your evidence against my mother when you lied to me from the very beginning?" "I didn't lie." "Silence is also a lie," he interrupted, "especially when you're a lawyer and you know the power of information." I stood silently. He turned back to the box and continued packing. "My mom isn't perfect," Brian said, not looking at me. She can be overly protective. She can interfere in my life, but she's not a criminal. She's not a manipulator. She's just a mother who cares about her son, and you're trying to make her out to be a monster to justify your own behavior. That's not fair. Not fair." He turned around abruptly. "What's not fair is that I found out the truth about us by accident. What's not fair is that my mom cries at night because she's being accused of terrible things. It's unfair that Uncle Michael died, and we're fighting over his inheritance instead of mourning him." His voice broke on the last words. I saw the pain in his eyes, real, deep pain. "Brian, I didn't mean to." "You didn't mean to, but it happened," he said, closing the box and sealing it with tape. "I don't know what really happened between you and my uncle. I don't know if my mother set something up or not, but I do know one thing. I can't be with someone I don't trust. And I don't trust you, Cindy, not anymore." He picked up the box and walked to the door. "I'll pick up the rest of my things next week. I'll let you know when I'm coming. Brian?" "That's it, Cindy, that's it." He left. The door closed. I stood in the middle of the apartment, feeling something inside me shatter into tiny pieces. The next few days were a blur. I hardly ate or slept. My colleagues at work gave me sympathetic looks, but no one asked any questions. Lance, a partner at the firm, called me into his office and told me that Barbara had officially filed a lawsuit. "They've brought in witnesses," he explained. "Your uncle's neighbor, a waiter, even your former colleague, Todd. They're painting a picture of unethical behavior. It doesn't look good, Cindy." I nodded silently. Do you have any defense? Anything that can refute their allegations?" I thought about the flash drive lying at home in my desk, about the recording of Barbara's conversation with Michael. "Maybe," I said quietly. That evening, I sat at my desk and wrote a letter to Barbara's lawyer. My fingers trembled, my head ached, but I wrote. I laid out the facts coldly, in legal language, the recording of the conversation, Detective Rex's testimony, the evidence of Barbara's plan. At the end, I added, "You can continue with the lawsuit, but then your client's entire plan will become public. The recording will be presented as evidence. Barbara Bellows will not only lose the case, she will lose her son's trust. Brian will find out everything. The question is your client prepared for such consequences?" I sent the letter and fell onto the bed without undressing. The reply came 2 days later. Barbara wanted to meet in person. She came in the evening. She knocked on the door. 3 short, decisive knocks. I opened it. Barbara stood in the doorway wearing a black blouse and dark pants. Her face was pale, her lips pressed together. "May I come in?" I stepped back. Barbara walked into the living room and sat down on the edge of the sofa. She kept her back straight and her hands folded on her knees. "You're bluffing," she said without preamble. "No, there's no recording. There's no evidence. You made it all up to scare me." I walked over to the table and picked up the flash drive. I placed it on the coffee table between us. "The coffee shop on Maple Street. A week before Michael died. You convinced him to leave me the apartment. You said it was a gift for our new family, that it would strengthen our relationship with Brian." Barbara stared at the flash drive. Her face didn't change, but I saw her hands tremble slightly. "Even if such a recording exists," she said slowly, "it proves nothing. I really wanted to help. I really thought it was the right thing to do. And then you decided to take the apartment away through the courts, to accuse me of manipulation, to ruin my reputation?" Barbara was silent. "That was the plan from the beginning," I continued quietly. "Give me the apartment, then take it away, so that Brian would see the scandal and lose trust in me, so that he would leave me. To you, I wanted to protect my son," Barbara said, her voice hardening. "You're not right for him. You're from another world. You hid the truth from him from the very beginning. I just helped him see who you really are. By using Michael's death. Michael died of a heart attack. I didn't kill him. But you used his death. You used his trust. He thought he was doing something good, and you used it for your own manipulation." Barbara stood up. She walked to the window and looked out at the street. "What do you want?" she asked without turning around. "For you to drop the lawsuit. Close the case. Leave me alone. And if I don't, then the recording will be made public. Brian will find out everything. He'll find out how you manipulated his uncle, how you set me up, how you used the death of a loved one for your own purposes." Barbara turned around. She looked at me for a long time, assessing me. "You've lost him," she said quietly. "Even if I drop the lawsuit, he won't come back. He doesn't trust you. I've already won." "I know," I replied just as quietly. "But you'll lose too. He'll find out the truth, sooner or later, and he'll never trust you again. You'll be left alone, Barbara, all alone." She was silent. Something flashed in her eyes, fear, realization. "All right," she said finally, "I'll drop the lawsuit, but that recording has to disappear forever. The recording will disappear when the lawsuit is officially closed. And you will never go near Brian again." I smiled bitterly. "Don't worry. He left me. You don't have to do anything." Barbara nodded. She walked to the door and reached for the handle. Suddenly, the door opened from the inside. Brian was standing in the doorway with a key in his hand. He froze, looking at both of us. "Mom, what are you doing here?" Barbara's turned pale. "Brian, we were just talking." "About what?" He came inside and closed the door behind him. His gaze shifted from his mother to me. "What were you talking about?" "Nothing," Barbara said quickly. "Just sorting out the formalities." "What formalities?" "I'm dropping the lawsuit," Barbara said quickly, nervously. "We've agreed. The case will be closed." Brian looked at her, then at me. Suspicion was written in his eyes. "Why are you withdrawing the lawsuit? You said you were sure you were right." Barbara faltered. "I just don't want any more conflict. I want this to be over." What did she mean? Brian turned to me. "When she said, this recording has to disappear." "What recording?" I remained silent. My head was spinning, and I was trembling inside. We had just reached an agreement with Barbara. If I told the truth now, she wouldn't withdraw the lawsuit. The trial would continue. My reputation would be destroyed, even if I won. And Brian. "Cindy, what recording?" Brian insisted. "It doesn't matter," I whispered. "Why doesn't it matter? What's going on here?" "Brian, let's go." Barbara took her son by the hand. "There's nothing to do here. We've agreed. The case is closed. There's no reason to stay here anymore." But Brian didn't move. He looked at me, and his gaze conveyed so much. Suspicion, pain, something else. I don't know what. "Tell me the truth," he asked quietly. "One last time. Tell me what's going on." I looked at him. This man I once loved, whom I probably still loved. But now I was tired. I had been through so much. Accusations, humiliation, fighting for my reputation. And now, finally, yes, there was a chance to end it all. Just let go. But for what? So that the scandal would start again, ending with him staying with his mother anyway? "Your mother is withdrawing the lawsuit," I said silently. "The apartment is mine. That's all you need to know." "But the recording—" "You heard wrong," I lied, the words burning my throat. "It was a misunderstanding." Brian looked at me for a long time. I could see he didn't believe me. I could see that he understood I was hiding something. But he didn't press the issue. Maybe he was tired too. Maybe he wanted it all to be over too. "Okay," he said finally, "if you say so." Barbara pulled him toward the door. "Come on, son." They left together. I heard their footsteps in the hallway, Barbara's voice. Calm, soft, then silence. I fell onto the sofa. My hands were shaking. My heart was pounding so hard it hurt. I had made my choice. I had chosen peace over truth. I had chosen loneliness over struggle. Barbara would withdraw the lawsuit. The apartment would remain mine. But Brian was gone. And this time, it was for good. Because he saw me lying. He saw me hiding something from him again. And even if he didn't know the details, he knew the main thing. I didn't trust him enough to tell him the truth. I won the apartment. But I lost everything that mattered. I woke up every night at 3 a.m. And I lay in the dark and stared at the ceiling, trying not to think. But the thoughts came anyway. About Brian, about the last look he gave me when he left with his mother. About how I lied to him again. The apartment felt foreign. Every corner reminded me of something painful. Here, Barbara and I had argued. Here, Brian had packed his things. Here, I had stood with a flash drive in my hands, deciding whether it was worth fighting for. A week after that last conversation, I called the Realtor. I want to sell the apartment as soon as possible. Castor, the same man who had brought the title deeds, was surprised. But you've just finalized everything. Are you sure? Yes, absolutely sure. My neighbor Estelle saw the for sale sign in the lobby of the building and knocked on my door in the evening with a cup of tea. Sweetheart, are you serious? After everything you've been through? I sat on the sofa, hugging my knees. That's exactly why. This apartment has taken away much more than it has given me. I never wanted it in the first place. It's not my home. It's a prison of memories. Estelle nodded understandingly. Where are you going? Oregon. Portland. My mother lived there after she divorced my father. She said it was beautiful there, peaceful. What about work? I'll find something. I'm a lawyer. There's always work for a lawyer. Estelle squeezed my hand with her dry, warm palm. You're strong, Cindy. Stronger than you think. The apartment sold in 2 weeks. A young couple with a child stood in the living room and planned where to put the Christmas tree. They looked at the apartment as if it were their dream home. I signed the papers and received a check. It was a decent amount, enough to start a new life. I handed in my resignation at work. My partner, Lance, called me into his office. Are you sure, Cindy? All that scandal is over now. You can stay and rebuild your reputation. I shook my head. I need a fresh start, a completely new one, somewhere where no one knows my story. Lance sighed. I understand. If anything, I can always write you a letter of recommendation. Thank you. I packed my things into cardboard boxes. Clothes, books, documents, everything else. Furniture, dishes, knickknacks. I left for the new owners. I wanted to leave as much behind as possible. My neighbor Estelle came to say goodbye. She brought a small box. This belonged to your mother. She gave it to me to keep when she moved to Oregon. She said if anything happened to her, I should give it to you. I opened the box. Inside was a thin gold chain with a heart-shaped pendant. My mother's. I remembered it. Thank you, I whispered, clutching the box. Be happy, child. You deserve happiness. I arrived in Portland in October. The city greeted me with rain, light, dreary rain that soaked through my clothes. I rented a small apartment on the second floor of an old building. 1 bedroom, a small kitchen, a living room with a large window overlooking a street, lined with maple trees. The first few weeks were difficult. I didn't know the city or the people. I went to interviews at law firms. The big firms looked at my experience and nodded, but when they Googled my name, their faces turned cold. The scandal had reached here too. In the end, I got a job at a small firm called Voice of the People. 3 lawyers who specialized in consumer protection. The salary was half of what I had been earning before, but the work was honest. We helped people who had been cheated by banks, insurance companies, and unscrupulous sellers. The head of the firm, Marta, a woman in her 50s with short gray hair, said at the interview, I'm not interested in your past, Cindy. I'm interested in whether you can do the job, can you? Yes. Then you're hired. At work, I met Clara, another lawyer at the firm, a woman my age with dark curly hair and an infectious laugh. She invited me for coffee after my first day on the job. "How do you like Portland?" she asked, sitting across from me in a small coffee shop. "Wet," I smiled. "You'll get used to it. It's always wet here, but it's beautiful. And the people are nice." "Where are you from?" "Memphis. I decided to change my surroundings." Clara didn't ask for details. She just nodded understandingly. Sometimes you need a change of scenery. I changed mine once and ended up here. It was the best decision of my life. We became friends. Clara became my guide in the city. She showed me the best cafes, bookstores, and parks. We met on weekends, went to the market, just walked around. But the loneliness didn't go away. At night, I lay in the dark and thought about Brian. I wondered if he thought about me, if he regretted it, if he knew I had moved. 3 months after the move, I woke up feeling nauseous. I ran to the bathroom and threw up. I thought I had eaten something bad yesterday, but the nausea repeated itself every morning. A week later, I finally realized my period was late, long overdue. I had always been regular as clockwork, but these months, all this stress, I bought a test at the pharmacy on the next street. I came home and locked myself in the bathroom. My hands were shaking as I unpacked the box. 2 stripes. I sat on the bathroom floor and stared at the test. I couldn't believe it. I took another one, then another. They all showed the same thing. Pregnant. I counted in my head. The last time I was with Brian was a week before we broke up. We tried to fix things, even though we both knew that nothing could be fixed. It was the last night we were truly together. I sat and cried. Out of fear, out of joy, out of horror. A baby. I'm pregnant. The next few days, I walked around in a trance. I worked mechanically, smiled when I had to, but my thoughts were far away. What to do? Tell Brian? Not tell him? I imagined calling him. "Hi, Brian. Remember me? The one who lied to you? Well, I'm pregnant." He won't believe me. He'll think I'm trying to trap him. That I want money, alimony, or worse, he'll tell Barbara. And then my mother-in-law will burst into my life again. She'll want to see her grandson or granddaughter. Control me. Control the child. No, I can't. Not after everything that happened. Clara noticed that something was wrong. She invited me to her house for the weekend. "You look terrible," she said bluntly. "What happened?" I didn't want to talk, but the words poured out. "I'm pregnant." Clara froze with a cup of coffee in her hands. "From that man from Memphis?" I nodded. "Does he know?" "No, and he won't find out." "Why?" "Because he doesn't trust me. Because things ended badly between us. Very, very badly. Because if I tell him, he'll think I'm manipulating him. And his mother," I sighed, "his mother will get back into my life. She's a snake, Clara. She destroyed me methodically, calmly. I can't let her have any influence on my child or on me again." "But it's his child too." "He rejected me," I said firmly. "He made his choice. I won't use the child to trap him. I won't use my pregnancy as a weapon." Clara was silent for a long time. Then she hugged me. "Then I'll be there for you, every step of the way. You're not alone. I left the babies, as it turned out later." The months passed. My belly grew. I worked until the very end. Martha let me work shorter days when it got hard. Clara went with me to all my doctor's appointments. My colleagues looked at me with surprise. A young woman, alone, pregnant, without the support of a partner. But no one asked any questions. In Portland, people respected personal space. In the 7th month, the doctor did an ultrasound and suddenly smiled. "Do you know you're having twins?" My world spun. "What? Twins? A boy and a girl. Here, look." She turned the screen toward me. I saw 2 small figures, 2 heads, 4 tiny hands. "Twins," I whispered. Clara, who was sitting next to me, squeezed my hand. "Oh my God, Cindy, 2. That night I lay in bed and cried. from happiness and fear at the same time. 2 children. How would I manage? Alone, without support, without Brian. But along with the fear came joy, pure, unadulterated joy. I was going to have children, too. I wouldn't be alone. I would never be alone again. Labor started at 38 weeks. In the middle of the night, suddenly, I woke up in pain and knew it was time. Clara arrived in 20 minutes and took me to the hospital. She held my hand while I screamed in pain. The delivery was difficult. Twins, both in breech position, so I had to have a C-section. But when they placed 2 tiny creatures on my chest, all the pain disappeared. I looked at them, small, red, with their eyes closed, and cried. "What will you name them?" Clara asked. I had been thinking about it for months. "Ivy," I said, stroking the girl's head. "And Ethan, Ivy, Ethan, my children, mine." I was in the hospital for 3 days. Clara came every day, bringing flowers, fruit, books. She helped with the babies. I didn't know how to feed them or change their diapers yet. At night, when everyone was asleep, I looked at Ivy and Ethan in their clear cribs next to each other. They were so small, so defenseless. Ethan had Brian's eyes. Dark, deep. Ivy had his smile even in her sleep. I saw him in them and cried. My children would grow up without a father, just like I had. It was incredibly painful. I promised myself that my life would be different, that my children would have a complete family. But here I was, alone, with 2 babies, without support. "I'm sorry," I whispered to them. "I'm sorry you won't know your father, that he won't be there for you, but I promise I will love you for both of us. I will protect you. I will be everything to you." The day of discharge came sooner than I expected. Clara arrived in the morning and helped me pack my things. We drove home slowly. Clara drove carefully, avoiding the potholes in the road. I sat in the back between 2 seats, holding Ivy and Ethan's hands. They slept, so peaceful. At home, Clara helped carry our things inside. She had furnished the nursery a week ago. 2 cribs, a changing table, a wardrobe. Everything was bought with the rest of my savings from the sale of the apartment. "You can do it," Clara said, hugging me goodbye. "I know you can. But I'm here for you. Always here for you." When she left, I was alone with the children. I sat down on the bed and took Ivy in one arm and Ethan in the other. They were warm and smelled of milk and something sweet and childlike. I looked at them and thought, years of single motherhood lie ahead, sleepless nights, exhaustion, fear, financial difficulties, loneliness, lack of support. But I won't give up, no matter what it takes. These children are my everything, my chance to do something right, my chance to love unconditionally, without manipulation, without pain. Ivy opened her eyes, big, dark. She looked at me and smiled weakly. "Hello, sunshine," I whispered. "Mommy's here. Mommy will always be here." Ethan stirred and yawned. I pressed them both to my chest and closed my eyes, tears streaming down my face again. "We'll make it." Somehow, we have to get through this. 3 years had flown by like one long, exhausting, but meaningful day. I stood at the window of a small house on the outskirts of Portland, my house, bought with a mortgage after I'd saved enough money, and watched Ivy and Ethan playing in the yard. Ivy sat under an apple tree with a book, 3 years old, and she was already trying to read, tracing the letters with her finger. Calm, thoughtful, serious beyond her years. Ethan ran around with a toy car making engine noises, a whirlwind always on the move, always getting into adventures. They were so different. But both of them were my everything. I had been working at Voice of the People for 3 years. Martha promoted me to senior lawyer. My salary increased, but I still didn't have enough money. Mortgage, kindergarten for the twins, food, clothes, doctors. I counted every dollar. Clara helped as much as she could. But a year ago, she got married and had her own child. She had her own family, her own worries. She still came over several times a week, but more and more often I had to hire a babysitter, Lucy, a student at the local college. Sometimes at night, when the children were asleep, I would sit in the kitchen with a cup of tea and think about my decision. Maybe I should have told Brian, but then I remembered Barbara, her cold eyes, her manipulations, and realized I had made the right choice. My children, only mine, and I would not give them to my mother-in-law. I would not let her influence them or me again. Ivy had Brian's eyes, dark, with the same golden flecks. Ethan had inherited his smile, slightly crooked with a dimple on his left cheek. Every day I saw it in them. It hurt, but I went on living. On Saturday, we went to the park, a large city park with a lake, playgrounds, and bike paths. The children loved this park. Ivy ran to the swings. Ethan grabbed a bucket and a shovel and carried them to the sandbox. I followed them, carrying a bag with snacks and water. "Mom, look how high!" Ivy shouted, swinging. "I see, sweetie, hold on tight." Ethan dug in the sand, making sandcastles. I sat down on a bench nearby and watched them. I smiled. "Cindy?" A voice behind me, a man's voice. Familiar. I froze. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. I slowly turned around. Brian. He was standing a few feet away from the bench. He looked older. His face was thinner. His hair was shorter. His beard was neatly trimmed. There were wrinkles under his eyes that hadn't been there before, but his eyes were the same. Dark, attentive. "Brian," I whispered. I instinctively stood up and took a step toward the children. I was ready to grab them and run. "Wait," he said quickly, raising his hands. "Please, don't go. I just need to talk. How did you find me?" "I searched for almost a year. Your former employers didn't want to tell me where you were, but I found the contact details of your new employers and called them. I said I had urgent documents from a lawyer to give you. They told me the city. Why?" My voice was cold. "Why were you looking for me?" He looked at me as if he was afraid I would disappear. "Can I sit down? Can we talk?" I wanted to say no. I wanted to take the children and leave, but something in his gaze stopped me. Fatigue, pain, a sincere desire to explain. "Okay, but not for long." We sat down on a bench. There was a distance between us. Safe, cold. I kept looking at the children, making sure they were in my field of vision. "I've been looking for you for a year," Brian began quietly. "After you left, I just existed for a while. I worked, came home, slept, but something wouldn't let me go. That conversation between you and Mom, what you talked about the plan, about Uncle Michael." I was silent, clenching my hands on my knees. "I found out the truth from the court documents. In one of the papers, I found a letter from you to Mom's lawyer about the evidence, about the recording of the conversation between her and Uncle Michael." My heart sank. I went to her. I put the letter in front of her. I said, "Explain." At first, she denied it. She said it was a lie, that you had made it all up, but I didn't back down. I sat and waited for hours. Brian fell silent, breathing heavily. In the end, she confessed, everything, that she had convinced Uncle Michael to leave you the apartment, that she had planned to take it away through the courts, that she wanted to show me what you were really like, so that I would leave you. It had been the plan from the beginning. I could see the pain in his eyes. Fresh, not yet healed. I couldn't believe it. My mother used my uncle's death. She used me. She used you, all for control. "What did you do?" I asked quietly. "I left. That same day, I packed my things and left. I changed my phone number. I moved to another city for a few months, then started looking for you. I wanted to apologize. I wanted to explain that I was an idiot, that I should have believed you. It's good that you figured it out," I said, looking at the children, "but it's too late." Brian looked at me for a long time. Then he looked at Ivy and Ethan. "Are they yours?" I frowned. "They're beautiful," he said softly. "Your husband is lucky." I was silent. I didn't tell him the truth. I just sat and watched Ethan build something out of sand and Ivy swing higher and higher. I have to go, I said, standing up. It's time for the kids to eat. Brian stood up too. Cindy, I'm not asking you to come back to me. I just wanted you to know that I found out the truth. And I've cut off all contact with my mother. She doesn't know where I am. She doesn't have my number, and she never will. I nodded. Bye, Brian. I called to the kids. They reluctantly followed me. Ivy turned and waved to Brian. He waved back. We were walking toward the park exit when I saw Clara. She was coming toward us with a stroller. Cindy, I thought you guys had already left. We were just about to. Clara glanced at Brian, who was still standing by the bench watching us. Who's that? An old acquaintance, I replied briefly. Clara came closer and lowered her voice. The same one? From Memphis? Yes. Oh my God, what is he doing here? He was looking for me. He wanted to apologize. Clara looked at me intently. And what did you say to him? Nothing. I just said goodbye. Brian began to approach us. Clara held out her hand to greet him. Hi, I'm Clara, Cindy's friend. Brian, he shook her hand. We were just about to go look for gifts for the kids. Clara said, it's the twins' birthday soon. I gave her a warning look, but it was too late. Twins? Brian repeated. Yes, Clara smiled, unaware of the tension. Ivy and Ethan. They'll be 3 in a few days, on the 23rd. I saw Brian freeze. His face turned pale. His lips parted, but no sound came out. The 23rd? He whispered, 3 years old? He looked at the children more closely. Ethan was laughing, trying to catch a butterfly. Ivy was pulling my hand, asking for ice cream. Brian saw Ivy's dark eyes, Ethan's smile with a dimple on his cheek. He counted in his head. His face changed. Surprise, realization, shock. Cindy, his voice trembled. How old are they exactly? 3 years and 2 months. He continued to count. January. We broke up in January. The last time we were together was a week before the breakup. Oh, God, he whispered. Cindy, are these my children? Clara turned to me abruptly, shocked. I didn't answer, just looked at Brian. Tell me, his voice became firmer. Are these my children? People around us started looking at us. Ivy whispered fearfully, Mommy, why is the man yelling? I crouched down next to the children and hugged them. It's okay, sweetheart. Then I stood up and looked Brian in the eyes. Don't scare the children. Yes, they are our children. Brian staggered. Clara caught him by the elbow. Maybe we should leave, she suggested quietly. Somewhere we can talk properly. We went to a cafe near the park. Clara took the children to the play area while Brian and I sat down at a table in the corner. Brian held his head in his hands, breathing heavily, trying to calm down. Why didn't you tell me? He finally asked without looking up. Because I didn't want to interfere in your life. I didn't want to go back to that horror. If I had told you, your mother would have found out about her grandchildren, and she would have interfered in my life again. And she would have started controlling and manipulating me. I couldn't let that happen. But they're my children. He raised his head and I saw tears in his eyes. Who would have grown up without a father if you hadn't found me by chance? I replied firmly. I didn't want anything from you, Brian. No money, no help, nothing. You don't have to worry. It doesn't concern you and won't cause you any trouble. Nothing to do with me? He stood up abruptly, but Clara gave the children a warning look, and he sat back down, lowering his voice. My children, my flesh and blood. It's nothing to do with me? You made your choice 3 years ago, I said, my voice breaking. You didn't believe me. You left with their mother. I didn't want to use my pregnancy as a weapon. I didn't want you to think I only wanted your child support money, or that I was lying again to get something. Brian covered his face with his hands. His shoulders shook. I lost 3 years, he whispered through his tears. 3 damn years. I didn't see them being born. I didn't see their first steps. Their first words. I didn't hear them call me Dad for the first time. I missed everything, God. It was the first time I had ever seen Brian like this. Almost broken, vulnerable, truly suffering. I didn't think you'd come back, I said quietly, and tears ran down my cheeks too. I didn't think you'd ever find out the truth. I just didn't want everything to fall apart again. I wanted to protect myself, protect them. Ethan and Ivy ran up to the table. They saw that we were both crying. Ivy hugged me around the neck. "Mommy, why are you crying?" Clara quickly came over and took the children by the hands. "Come on, kids, let's go see the ducks by the fountain. Mom and Uncle Brian will talk a little longer." She led them away, trying to distract them. Brian and I sat in silence. We wiped our tears with napkins. "I want to be in their lives," he said finally, his voice firm. "I want to be a father, a real father. I won't let them grow up without me. Not now that I know. Do you understand?" "What about Barbara?" "She won't find out. I promise you. She doesn't know where I live. She doesn't know my number, and she won't find out about her grandchildren unless you want her to." I looked at him, at this man who had lost 3 years of his children's lives, who was crying because he realized what he had lost. "I need time," I said. "Time to think, to understand how this is all supposed to work. As much as you need," he reached across the table but didn't touch me. "But please, Cindy, give me a chance. I won't try to take them away. I won't interfere in your life. I just want to be there. I want to know them. I want them to know me." I looked out the window where Clara was showing the children the ducks. Ivy was laughing. Ethan was trying to feed them bread. "Okay," I said quietly. "Let's try. But slowly. And if I see even the slightest threat from your mother, you won't. I promise." The next few months were a period of adjustment. Brian moved to Portland, found a job at a logistics company, and rented an apartment 20 minutes from my house. He came 3 times a week, at first for an hour. He played with the children, read books, built with blocks. I was always nearby. I didn't trust him completely. Old wounds still hurt. But I saw how he interacted with them. I saw the love in his eyes. A month later, I told the children the truth. "Ivy, Ethan," I sat with them on the sofa. "Uncle Brian, he's not just an uncle. He's your dad." Ivy looked at me with wide eyes. "Dad? A real dad?" "Yes, sweetheart." Ethan jumped for joy. "I have a dad, just like Jake from kindergarten." They ran to Brian, who was standing in the kitchen. They hugged his legs. "Daddy!" Ethan shouted. Brian crouched down and hugged them both. He cried, not hiding his tears. A few months later, Brian offered to move in with us, not as a partner, just to be closer to the children and help me. I thought about it for a week. I weighed the risks, fears, and possibilities. "Okay, he finally said. But you'll have your own room and clear boundaries between us, so no, of course. Whatever you say." He moved in October. The kids were thrilled. Their dad was living with them. Brian helped get them up in the morning, drove them to preschool, and made dinner when I was late from work. We weren't a couple. We were parents, learning to live together for the sake of the children. But slowly, step by step, something between us was changing. We were learning to trust again. We were learning to see each other again Saturday. We're in the park, the same one where we met again a month ago. Ivy is swinging. Ethan is climbing on the carousel. Brian helps them, catches them, laughs with them. I sit on a bench and watch this scene. A month ago, Brian moved in with us. We lived together as a family, although not quite a complete one. He comes up to me and sits down next to me. His face is tanned. The day before yesterday, we all went to the ocean as a family. "Thank you," he says quietly, "for giving me a chance." I look at him, at this man who lost 3 years but came back, who changed, who proved he could be a father. "You've become worthy of him," I say simply. Brian looks at the children. Ivy waves at us, smiling broadly. Ethan shouts, "Dad, look how high." Brian takes my hand, carefully, as if afraid I'll take it away. I don't take it away. I just sit and look at our children, feeling the warmth of his palm. We're not married. We don't live as a couple yet. But we are a family, made up of the fragments of the past, glued together by patience, forgiveness, and love for these two little creatures. Barbara doesn't know about her grandchildren. She doesn't know where Brian is. And that's the only thing that allows me to breathe easy, because if she ever finds out, but I'm not thinking about that right now. Right now, I'm looking at my children laughing, at Brian smiling at me. And for the first time in 4 years, I feel something close to peace